The rain was relentless that evening, pouring down in sheets so heavy that the city lights blurred into streaks of gold and silver on the windshield. Daniel drove slowly through the narrow lanes of downtown, his wipers fighting a losing battle against the storm. He was exhausted. Another long day at the construction site, another reminder of the weight of life pressing down on his shoulders. Bills, overtime, and the ache of loneliness after his wife's passing 2 years ago. Everything seemed to exist only to test his endurance. But he had learned to live quietly through the noise, finding small meaning in ordinary acts of kindness, holding a door, offering a meal, listening when no one else would. That night, however, something shifted. Just as he was about to take a turn toward home, he saw her, a young woman standing in the rain near a bus stop, drenched, shivering, and holding onto a torn duffel bag. People passed by her, heads down, pretending not to notice. The world had grown so cold that someone in distress had become a background image no one cared to pause for. But Daniel couldn't drive past. Something inside him, that same quiet voice that had kept him human through all his pain, whispered that he needed to stop. He pulled over and rolled down his window. She looked up slowly, startled, her eyes swollen from crying. He could see she was young, maybe in her early 20s, but her expression carried years of exhaustion. "Are you okay?" he asked gently. She hesitated, her lips trembling, and then simply shook her head. That small motion, so fragile and defeated, broke something in him. Without another word, he stepped out of his truck, grabbed his umbrella, and approached her. She was soaked through to her bones, her hands clutching the bag as if it held her entire world. He asked if she needed a ride, and after a long pause, she whispered, I don't have anywhere to go." Daniel stood there for a moment, the rain pouring over them both, realizing the truth behind her words. She wasn't waiting for a bus. She was waiting for hope. Backhand index pointing right. If you believe kindness can change a life, please take a second to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Spark. Together, we can keep compassion alive in this world. He offered to take her somewhere warm, a diner nearby that stayed open late. She hesitated, studying his face, but something in his eyes felt safe. Inside the diner, the warmth hit her like sunlight. Her hands shook as she wrapped them around the steaming cup of coffee he bought her. Slowly, her story spilled out. Her name was Lily. She had come to the city chasing dreams, art school, independence, a future she could shape. But life had other plans. Her stepfather's abuse had pushed her away from home. Her part-time job couldn't cover rent. When she lost it last week, she was evicted. For 2 nights, she'd been sleeping under a bridge. Daniel listened without interruption. The pain in her voice wasn't just about hardship, it was about betrayal, disappointment, and being unseen. He recognized it. Once upon a time, after his wife's death, he too had walked through days when the world felt indifferent. The idea that someone so young could be carrying such despair made his chest tighten. He didn't have much, but what he did have, he could share. That night, he let Lily stay in the spare room of his small apartment. It was modest, peeling wallpaper, creaky floors, the faint smell of coffee that never seemed to leave, but it was safe. She kept thanking him, her voice trembling, and he only said, "We all need a hand sometimes." Days turned into weeks. Lily helped around the house, cooking, cleaning, and sometimes sketching quietly at the kitchen table. Her drawings were beautiful, delicate faces, stories told through eyes and expressions. Daniel saw in her art something he hadn't seen in years, hope struggling to be reborn. Slowly, laughter began to return to the small apartment. The emptiness that had haunted his evenings began to fade, replaced by quiet companionship. But the world doesn't always smile kindly on kindness. Neighbors whispered. People assumed things they didn't understand. Daniel's coworkers made crude jokes when they found out he had a young woman living with him. Yet, he didn't care. He knew what was true, that he had simply done what any human should. Still, the pressure of gossip weighed heavily on him. Lily noticed. One evening, she told him she would move out once she found a job, not wanting to cause him more trouble. But he refused to let shame steal the goodness of what they had built. "People talk because they can't understand," he said softly. "But I do. You're safe here until you can stand on your own." Lily found a job a few weeks later at a small art store. Her eyes began to shine again, her smile growing more frequent. She would leave small sketches on the kitchen counter, of flowers, of city lights, of Daniel reading the paper, quiet thank yous in pencil. Daniel didn't say much about them, but each one touched him deeply. She was rebuilding, and he was witnessing it. One day, she came home with tears in her eyes. The store owner had seen her sketches and told her about an upcoming local art exhibition that accepted new talent. Lily hesitated to apply. Self-doubt ran deep, but Daniel encouraged her. "You've already lived through the worst," he said. "Don't be afraid to show the world your light." She submitted her work. Weeks later, her art was accepted. It was a small event, but to her, it meant everything. The night of the exhibition, Daniel stood at the back of the gallery, watching her glow under the soft lights. People admired her work, portraits filled with empathy, sorrow, and quiet strength. When someone asked her what inspired her most, she simply said, "Kindness. The kind that saves you when the world forgets you exist." Daniel's eyes stung as he looked at her. She had found her place again. But fate had one more turn to make. A few months after the exhibition, Daniel's health began to decline. He ignored the dizziness and fatigue at first, thinking it was just exhaustion. But one morning, he collapsed at work. The diagnosis was serious, a heart condition that required surgery. He tried to keep it from Lily, not wanting to worry her, but she found the hospital papers one evening and broke down in tears. "You saved me," she said. "Now it's my turn." From that day, she never left his side. She worked extra shifts to cover his medication costs, painted late into the night to sell her art online, and stayed by him through every hospital visit. The man who had once given her a roof now received the same compassion he had once offered freely. The roles had reversed, but the bond remained unshaken. Months passed. The surgery was successful, but the recovery was long and painful. Lily would sit by his bedside, painting to pass the time. One of her most cherished works during that period was titled, "The Man Who Stopped in the Rain." It was a vivid portrayal of that first night, the storm, the broken girl, and the stranger who refused to look away. That painting would later become her most famous piece, symbolizing compassion in its purest form. Years went by. Lily's career flourished beyond anything she could have dreamed of. Her paintings began to be displayed in galleries across the country. But no matter how far she went, she always returned home, to Daniel's small apartment, the one place that still smelled faintly of coffee and second chances. She would cook him his favorite meals, read him letters from people who had been moved by her art, and tell him that every success she had was his too. And when Daniel grew old and frail, she stayed beside him, holding his hand through every storm life had left to offer. One quiet evening, as the sun dipped low behind the city skyline, Daniel looked at her and said with a trembling smile, "You were never a burden, Lily. You were my blessing." He passed away peacefully that night, with her hand still in his. At his funeral, Lily stood before a small gathering of friends and strangers. She spoke softly, her voice breaking but steady. "He helped me when no one else did. He gave me shelter, dignity, and faith in goodness again. Everything I am today is because someone chose kindness over convenience." There wasn't a dry eye in the room. After his passing, Lily dedicated her entire art foundation to him, the Daniel Trust for Second Chances. It helped young people struggling with homelessness and abuse find shelter, education, and hope. Through every smile, every painting, every life touched by that foundation, Daniel's spirit lived on. Years later, one of her art pieces hung in a national museum. Below it, the inscription read, "Dedicated to the man who stopped in the rain." Backhand index pointing right. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to Kindness Spark. Your support helps us keep spreading stories of real compassion and hope that the world needs today. Speech balloon before you go, comment below. What's one act of kindness you'll never forget? Because sometimes, the smallest kindness doesn't just save a life, it transforms it forever.